Welcome to Education of a Strength Coach. My story, Phil Richards, and it's been a very interesting story. It's been a long story, but I'm going to get straight to the point on what allowed me to have significant success as a strength coach in multiple sports at the highest level. I think one of the first things is you can have a plethora of qualifications. You could have a PhD in strength training, for example. You could be a great academic. But if you're not doing your time in the trenches, in the gym, and seeing what works and what doesn't, then really qualifications are pretty meaningless. I think time in the trenches are undoubtedly as important as qualifications, if not more. That's what I kind of learned, all my mistakes to ensure that I got results. And I sort of like my philosophy hasn't really changed over 35 plus years of training people. I like to ensure that nutrition and lifestyle factors, first of all, are at the core of someone's sort of training protocols. Because one of the biggest things I learned is that you can't add stress to the human organism if that person is constantly under stress. And stress can be multiple factors, but the body will respond to stress exactly the same no matter what the stress it is. So I was always really big on making sure nutrition, lifestyle, optimum supplementation, the mindset as well, which is tough to instill into an athlete. As the saying goes, you've either got it, you're not. But you can certainly add, a bit of steel to someone, which I'll explain shortly, and also the absolute importance of rest and recovery. Once all those are in place, then the training needs to be intense. Full stop. There's no way to sugarcoat that. I mean, I was very fortunate because people often ask me, what university did you go to learn this? I went to the University of the British Army as an infantry soldier at the age of 16, spent a number of years there. And one of the things that I always give the army credit for, especially when I was in the early 80s, was really my infantry training, by the way, was 10 months. I was a junior soldier. And I have to say, well, it was genuinely brutal. But the biggest thing I learned there was self-belief. Yeah. Never, ever throw the towel in. There will be situations which are so horrible that you're so unused to, that you just never throw the towel in. And that also sort of rolls into the never give up. I mean, but one of the biggest things is that I learned after that infantry training was like, well, I can actually do anything I want to. I know that's a cliche, but without that type of mindset, then really it's difficult to progress in life. So I always have great admiration for my infantry training because I truly believe that's why I was so successful as a strength and conditioning coach when I went into professional rugby. I was one of the first full-time strength and conditioning coaches in professional rugby, which hadn't long been professional. The game only went professional in 1995. I come in around 97. There was no real template. Teams didn't really know what to do because the game had never been professional before. So the team that I worked with, which was Swansea Rugby Club, which back in those days was just an unbelievable team. I kind of, from my strength training perspective, I sort of brought in the Mike Menzer training principles that I'd done a number of courses with. I was a senior weight training instructor. I did multiple courses, but his sort of message resonated with me at the time. And I think the reason why I had such success with Menzer's principles is that most of the other teams were so overtrained that Mike Menzer's principle certainly didn't allow me to overtrain. If know anything about it, it's one set to failure. The sessions were brutal, but they were very short. I was always of the mindset less is more, real high quality training over quantity of training. And with that team, I won, multiple league titles, cup finals, and it was an amazing learning curve for me. And I also that's when I started to bring in the type of strongman type training into rugby as well, sort of, pushing cars, flipping tires. And that had a significant effect. I was really big. Whatever you did from a training perspective had to transfer into your sport. Never mimic the sport in training, but there has to be a transfer from your training. And you'll see some of the players that I'm very proud to have had some form of influence on. You'll see this testimonial from a great Welsh great, Colin Jarvis, and there's a few others if you go onto my website. Not blowing smoke, I just want to show you the effect that a real good training environment with great players, great coaches can have on a team. The biggest mistake I made with Swansea Rugby Club then, I'd been there for 2 years, and then I spent 1 year then where I fell into the functional training world, which is like, all the cables, Swiss balls, sissel pads, balancing, on pads. That's great if you ever train in an earthquake. If not, then absolutely meaningless. And, so I did multiple courses with Paul Check. And it was generally, he taught me how to never train an athlete, if I'm honest with you, but he taught me how to train somebody that was very dysfunctional. So I have to give him credit there. And the biggest thing I sort of observed that season is that you literally do become your training. I saw like my training methods up until then were exceptionally aggressive, and we played exceptionally aggressively. And then a year then of, just literally fanging around on Swiss balls and cables and sort of postural fucking alignment and all that, it was just the worst season. But that was the greatest sort of lesson that I'd learned. Keep the fundamentals, as Vince Lombardi. Fundamentals win ball games. So leave the circus training for the clowns. Then in 2003, I took a year off. I'd been in professional rugby for 5 seasons. Had an absolute blast. And then I went around the world and started like sourcing out who was the so-called most effective strength coaches in the world, sort of Olympic weightlifting coaches, speed coaches, hormonal doctors. I probably interned with more people than any other strength coach, I believe, in the world. And I did it because I had this huge appetite for learning. So the first guy I went to was the late Charles Poliquin. And I had, great respect for Charles. Didn't resonate with him that much, if I'm honest with you. And I didn't really use many of his training principles because they did not resonate with the way I trained. But the biggest credit I'll always give to Charles, and I did multiple internships with him, is when I was telling him about this sort of, going down the wrong path with the cables, the Swiss balls, etc. He just said one thing, just get them strong. And I know that sounds simple, but that's it. I think I've watched Olympic teams being trained by S&C coaches, and it's paralysis by analysis. Everyone is just overthinking things. And then on that note, Charles, in fairness, put me onto, he mentioned a few times Westside Barbell. And then I was the first European strength coach to go to Westside Barbell in 2003 as well, late 2003 it was. And that was just what an education that was, I can tell you. And I mean, I went there multiple times. I've written a book on my story, Ultimate Strength and Conditioning book, where there's a lot of the Westside stuff in there, and how I applied that to multiple sports. And I mean, at the highest level, if you go onto my website and just click on testimony, you see all the different athletes that I work with. That's not blowing smoke. I kind of always give Louis huge credit for, he was definitely one of the biggest influences in my career. And more importantly, when I applied Westside, because I'd studied Westside before I got there, I watched all the videos. I actually ended up being in one of the videos, Deadlift Secrets. And I remember being there for the first time. I mean, I wrote like huge amounts of notes. And then I remember reading it, going back on the plane thinking, well, really, I could have written this on a page, I mean, 90% of the program was posterior chain. Get that strong, everything seems to function, and then really just the intensity and then the smartness of the program, because the program was all about the conjugated method, which is a mixture of max effort work, dynamic, which is like explosive lifting, and then also then work capacity / hypertrophy. And I'm rotating those exercises every week. I won't go into that now, that's for another video. And when I say I saw incredible results with athletes, I am not lying. It was just absolutely incredible. And one of the biggest things Louis taught me, he taught me so much. I can't give the late Louis Simmons enough credit. I mean, what an unbelievable guy. Was really, when weak, get them strong. When strong, get them fast. And when fast, get them strong. I saw so many coaches in so many different sports trying to do Olympic weightlifting with athletes who were as weak as piss. it was just like, what are you doing? I mean, I watched one, I'm not going to name and shame because that's not my personality. I watched one coach like with a, group of elite sort of rugby players spend literally 2 hours trying to teach him snatch with a broomstick. I think, why just fucking do snatch pulls or something, just lift some weight. So paralysis by analysis is a big thing. The Westside system has a combination of sort of max effort. So things like powerlifting and strongman. I mean, I love the strongman type training. That has a huge carryover to anything. Things like super yoke walks or whatever. I mean, what a brutal exercise. Obviously, heavy tire flips. I was always big into grip strength as well. I was doing like get the players and athletes to do pull-ups with towels and stuff like that. And then like Olympic lifting, most people can't Olympic lift, even like once they've had many years of training as an athlete. So I always thought, well, there's many ways to skin a cat. There's dozens of ways to do like a snatch pull or a hang snatch. So I was always very quite innovative. And then obviously then depending on the whether that athlete, male or female, needs more sort of muscle bulk, then obviously then you can start bringing in also the hypertrophy type training. So also then not long after I'd been working with Louis, I also started working with the late Charlie Francis, who was Ben Johnson's coach. Charlie was just again, I mean, him and Louis just had this incredible influence. There's only three people who've had this huge influence on me. It was Louis Simmons, Charlie Francis, and I'll mention the last person towards the end of this very brief introduction before I start launching my YouTube, more videos on, subjects on nutrition, supplementation, blood chemistry analysis, training, etc. Charlie Francis, amazing, just truly amazing. Now, the mistake that I was doing before I met Charlie, I fell into the trap of what is known as SEQ, speed, agility, and quickness. So I'd have all the ladders, cones. I mean, it would look like Heathrow Airport, at one of my sessions. There'd be in everything, hurdles everywhere. And now they're great as a warm-up, but as Charlie taught me, like we'd be using parachutes as well, for resistance running. Don't try to inhibit that movement, as he taught me, because when you start doing things like putting a parachute on and trying to run as fast as you can, you're altering the nervous system. When you do like agility ladders, for example, you become good at agility ladders because in reality of professional sports, especially game sports, sort of agility is a reaction. It's not programmed. So the biggest thing he taught me, Louis taught me how to get strong, and Charlie taught me how to get fast. And when I started combining that into the programs, well, as I said, it just allowed me to have this incredible success with so many different types of athletes. The other huge thing that Charlie taught me as well, and when I adopted this to the second team that I started working with, which I'll explain in a second, was the importance of recovery in terms of like massage, hot tubs, saunas, ice baths. And then when I started bringing that into the jigsaw puzzle, then again, just things went to a completely different level. So the second team I worked with, I'd gone from like an incredibly talented team full of international players and British Lions, then to a championship team in England. So I come from Wales, I went into England, and I went into a championship team with not one international player in the team. And they've been trying to get out of the championship for 5 seasons into the Premiership. They were the richest team in that league. They had millions of pounds being pumped into it, but they never ever got out of that league. So I come along, and that time they caught me just at the right time because I was fully West Side, I was fully Charlie. Plus I'd had success with other teams, so I kind of had a bit of an inkling myself as well. And then so the biggest thing I instilled with this team, which was Worcester Warriors 2003, was really again the importance of nutrition and lifestyle, the importance of when you train with maximum intensity. Okay, and then we have the optimum recovery. So there was total trust. Yes, of course. We won the first season I was there. We won 26 games out of 26. It's never been done before since. And no, I'm not taking all the credit. I'm not that much of a dumbass. Great group of players, great group of coaches. But the confidence they had from their training was just exceptional. And, we were the only team as well that came into the Premiership after being promoted, not to be relegated that season, actually finished the highest I think they've ever finished. So and just all based on, just increasing this incredible physicality, which then gives confidence and which obviously rolls into self-belief. And I remember one of a great friend of mine, Neil Taylor, who is a very accomplished weightlifting coach and an ex-weightlifting competitor, Commonwealth medalist himself. I remember him walking into the gym when I was at Worcester Warriors, saying the hairs on the back of his neck stood up. I mean, it was just the intensity. It was like coming into Westside for rugby players. And I was one of those coaches as well. If you dared bring your mobile phone into that session, and I hear that going off, I used to have four real heavy cars outside the gym with about six rugby fields to push him around, and I would destroy him until there was such. I was always of the mindset of like when you train, yeah. You can text, phone, do whatever you want later on. You're only going to be in this room, in this gym, maybe 45, 60 minutes maximum. And if you can't concentrate on you're not going to concentrate on the field. And if you haven't got the discipline to lift with intent, you can't text in between fucking squats. If you dare, I would punish the whole team until there was such an environment where like we have to train. And that was nothing to do with my egos. Like I knew that would go into the field with them. And interestingly, that year, that 3 years I was with Worcester Warriors, 2003, 2006. We did not have one hamstring injury in that period, and we were regulated by the RFU. So, like, you would not that you would ever make that up, because you've got no need to. And you'll read this little testimonial from Claire, who was the physio at the time. And I know, I strongly believe why. And that was my time from Westside, where I said 90% of the program was posterior chain. I brought in things like reverse hypers. And I also brought in things like back attacks, which is a good morning machine, and then started doing real heavy box squats, which is like a hamstring squat. And the injuries just literally dissipated, which was just an incredible factor, as well as performance improving significantly. I then went after 3 years from Worcester. I went on to London Harlequins. I wasn't there long. I was only there for a few months, only because I didn't like London. Loved the team, loved the players. And again, like they were at that particular period of time, I would have classed them as one of the softest teams I've ever played against as a coach with a team. Just no edge at all. So again, I take the template that I'd sort of manufactured at Worcester. Worcester was like my PhD in strength. And it was 3 years where I threw everything at it. I saw what worked and what didn't. Quickest way to learn, trust me. And in that time as well, again, I was still going all around the world and started working with the greatest weightlifting coaches in the world as well. And as I said, a lot of sort of hormonal doctors. And then when I went to Harlequins, I was there for a few months, again, put that template in place. And they went on to have, I mean, players tell me even years later, it was just again, just the environment. Always remember this, you become your environment. And if that environment is soft, no matter how great a person you are, you end up becoming soft. And I kind of learned that a little bit later, because after a few months there, I then went on to become a consultant in 2006, 2007. And I consulted for a number of teams. It was Leicester Tigers, which is a giant of English rugby. Wigan Warriors, which is a rugby league team, hugely famous team. And also Bolton Wanderers, which were in the Premiership at that time when Sam Allardyce was there. And the greatest thing I learned, because so I was going into all these different environments. And you can just see, like Leicester, what an environment that was in that period. I mean, like, they were a hugely successful team. And again, the biggest thing I think I did that season with Leicester Tigers from a strength and conditioning perspective, because I was a nutrition and S&C consultant to them, like I was with the other teams. And I would go in there, so I would do all the body fat composition tests and hydration testing, look at food diaries, advise on training, and they could take it or not. So like the head strength coach at Leicester at that time was a guy called Craig White. And I remember it was late October, early November, and it was the first time I'd been there. It was a gym session. There was about 6 exercises on the board for them to do during that session. I said, man, there's just too many exercises. What I would do, from what I've learned, telling me to fuck off, I don't mind. I would wipe them all off, just put one exercise there. And I said I would put power cleans there. And when they hit a PB, they can go. and you've never seen nothing like it. I've never seen weights being lifted like that, okay? Because that was the biggest thing I learned from Westside, 10 sets, your big bang exercise, give it everything. Anything after that is a bonus. And and the atmosphere game was just incredible. And and then what I normally do then would normally do, which we didn't do in this particular session, it was just to show like when players start to really tap into their strength, because that was the biggest thing with Westside. The first sort of big bang exercise is 10 to 12 sets where I learned you don't really get really tap into your true sort of neuromuscular strength till about the 6 or 7 set. That's when, most people start getting stronger. Most people have moved on after 4 sets. So they never really tap into their true strength. And the other big thing that Louis taught me as well, which is why I like getting down to 1 rep as well, not all the time, but on a regular occasion, and that 1 rep may take 4 seconds. It could be a deadlift, 4 seconds to lift off the floor. If you don't strain, you don't gain. And a lot of people never get to that. So that's what I brought into, a number of teams that I was consulting for. I tried it with other teams, again, same result. And then, as I said, the other teams I was working with, so I was working with a Premiership football team at that time, and they literally did have all the gear. I mean, it was Bolton Wanderers, 2006 to I think it was 2008. I mean, great setup. I mean, it was one of the best setups in European football. We were the first team to bring cryotherapy into the Premiership. And like it was just like they had all the ice baths, and I mean, like proper plunge pools, saunas, different massage therapists. I mean, they were world renowned for their sports science, and all the GPS, heart rate monitor, big machines. And as I said, without being cynical, all the gear, no fucking idea, because no one really trained, not with any intensity. It was absolutely paralysis by analysis. And the season I was there, again, absolutely not taking credit. I think it was one of the highest they'd ever finished. And just based again on fundamentals, just get the players stronger, get them healthier, and guess what? Their skills improve enormously, And at that same, sort of year that I was there, you'll see there first of all, like, one of the players said, awesome guy, Quinton Fortune, ex-Man United, Bolton. He ended up actually interning with me a few times a few years later. But at that time when I was up there as well, I then met Amir Khan. He was a very young, I think he was 19 years of age at that time. And, he was introduced to me and by one of the sports science staff at Bolton, because I used to go up there and train, and said, oh, look, can you do anything with this guy? I mean, I didn't know who he was, and no doubt he didn't know who I was. And I'd never trained a boxer before. And I thought, yeah, absolutely not a problem. And again, as soon as I started applying this very fundamental strength, conditioning, speed with nutrition, it was literally incredible. I had an incredible time with Amir. And then at the same time as well, I was training an Olympic steeplechaser. So you couldn't get sports more contrasting. You got I was training a Premiership football team. I was or consulting rugby teams, boxers, steeplechasers, and the program was very, very safe. The biggest thing I can tell you is if you are a strength coach or if you're an elite athlete, is when you train, don't try to mimic your sport. So, for example, going back to Amir, when I first met him, I remember the first session I observed. Like I hadn't come on board full time at that stage, so I just sort of sat back and just observed. And it was like a 30-minute boxing circuit before we started doing some sparring. So, usual stuff, boxing with dumbbells, cables, jumping over things, boxes and stuff like that, which has no real. First of all, when you start doing like boxing with dumbbells and cables, those muscles are so overtrained already. Just leave them, and don't try to mimic the actual movement that you're trying to do as well, because that's so skill specific. You're much better off working the antagonistic type muscles, and then leaving those muscles to become fresher for the actual event itself. I was always really big that, like if it was sparring or if it was a team run in rugby, that the players or the boxers or the athletes that I was training were fresh, because that's the most important thing. That's what you're going to get judged on, is your performance, in the event itself. So, I mean, I had incredible results with Stuart Stokes, who became, I think he was the oldest athlete of the 2012 Olympics. And again, adopted the same methods. And I remember one of the first calls I had with Stuart, after he took me on as his trainer, was saying, Phil, he said, I don't think I can train with you anymore. I said, why is that, mate? He said, I was lapped by the oldest guy in the team last night, in the club. I think he was 72, the guy who lapped him. He said, I can't fucking walk, mate. I said, mate, well, this is the first session. Let's see where we are in 6 months. I knew what was going to happen. He couldn't walk, by the way, because I'd given him good mornings the day before and something called lunge and reach, and you're not going to walk after that. It was a bit of a deliberate ploy, to be honest with you. And I think it was 6 months later he smashed the British record. He then became one of the oldest ever Olympians as well, which was great. And then at the same time, then I started doing some talks, and I met up with Glenn Ross, who had won UK Strongest Man multiple times. And I mean, what a legend, and you'll see, just again, I don't take credit for these testimonials, by the way, so don't think I'm blowing smoke. I'm putting them there just for some interest reason. And again, why did I have success? So you couldn't get now more contrasts. And you've got rugby, you've got Premiership football, you've got boxing, you've got endurance right now, and then you've got like one of the world's strongest men. And again, just really the fundamentals of with Glenn, the biggest thing really was nutrition and health. And then at the same time, then lots of trainers were coming from all over the world to internship with me. And this lady, Nina, I trained her, her sort of boyfriend at the time who was a Premiership football, and he put me, he put her in touch with me, so she came down and she went on to become, like a pro sort of figure athlete. And again, this was then, so again, more contrast in there, so that now you're applying your sort of trade to something that the whole name of the game really is hypertrophy, to build muscle tissue. And there was a plethora more, that you can sort of have a look on my website to see. And then the other huge influence on my life was undoubtedly this gentleman here, Dr. Serrano. I was the first European strength coach to work with Dr. Serrano. Again, I think that was actually early 2004, that was. And been there multiple times with Dr. Serrano. He's generally like one of the greatest doctors out there on performance, just way ahead of his time. And I've been there multiple times with him. We've lectured together. But one of the most important thing Dr. Serrano taught me, which was many, but it was undoubtedly the importance of lab testing. And when I started to be able to interpret lab work, having taken a multitude of qualifications in that arena, a whole new world opened up to me. It was like I didn't have to guess anymore, especially from a nutritional requirement, a supplement requirement, and I have to say from a training requirement as well, because when you become really well read on blood and stool work, you can actually see not only the obvious, the nutritional deficiencies or excesses, the level of health of that person, how well is the digestive system working, for example, and the hormonal system, but also how well would this person respond to exercise. And if you see a lot of markers really out because that person is too nutrient deficient or too stressed, you've got to address them more. Then the program then becomes much, much more results orientated. And, so I've worked with a plethora of people over the years interpreting lab work, and one of the most sort of well-known would obviously be Eddie Hall, which I did multiple times. I first started looking at Ed's bloods in 2015. And then just to finish off then is just like, so no matter what the sport, or whether you're a weekend warrior or whether you're a professional athlete, professional strength coach, my advice, and it is my advice only, is focus on getting them healthy, getting them stronger, optimize recovery, and performance will always follow. It really is that simple.